Hello, I'm Esther Roche and welcome to the Mom CEO podcast. Join me as we explore the dynamic intersection of motherhood and entrepreneurship. From the challenges to the triumphs, we're here to unravel it all. Get ready for insightful conversations, practical wisdom, and a whole lot of inspiration. Let's embark on this empowering journey together. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mom CEO. I'm your host Esther Roche, and today I'm joined by Marie-Louise O'Neil. Hello Marie, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, you're very welcome. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience and just tell us a little bit about what you do and what you're all about?
As you said, I'm Marie-Louise. My business is called Lovely Evolution, and I'm a branding and Canva design specialist. So that means I combine my branding know-how. I'm actually a trained graphic designer, so I studied branding and packaging many moons ago. I've been working in the design industry for 20 years or so now. And I've combined it with Canva because I heard about Canva back in 2017, although Canva has been going a lot longer. And it just made sense to me to make it part of my USP, sort of one of my tools to work with my clients, because I work with a lot of small business owners. So I now have two arms to my business. I have the design services where I create things like logos and design templates in Canva, but I also teach people how to use Canva as well. So I try to do it in a very friendly and easy to understand way. So although I've got that design pedigree and background, I'm the sort of person who's like, oh, just move this guy over here and just sort of fiddle it over there. I'm very non-technical in the way I talk about trying to teach people so that they can understand it. So I'm sort of sneaking in some of that design know-how in there.
Yeah, it can be quite daunting because I find with, I wouldn't say I'm not very good, but I try my best. But sometimes, when it's not your strong, um, when you haven't got the strong ability to do something, you kind of look at it and you think, oh my God, how am I going to do this? How do I create something from this and stuff? So it's incredible that you mentioned you teach in an easy to understand way. So, tell us a little bit about the programs that you run. What kind of things do you do?
So I have a long established monthly membership called Lovely Canva Club, which I launched back in January 2020. So it was always part of my long-term goals to move online, and it was quite a natural progression. I'd been doing some one-off kind of trainings and workshops, both in person and online, and it just made sense to create something where it's affordable to join, it's accessible by most people, and I've come to really, it's something I really enjoy doing. And I think there's a lot of people who I sort of say, oh, I'm not creative, and obviously they'll have their own specialisms and they're the expert what they do. But I think with a tool like Canva, which is so practical and focused and aimed at most people, it's, anyone can use it, but it's about learning how to use it better. So that's where I come in terms of being able to not only sort of go, well, this is this tool, which obviously is helpful, but it's also trying to improve how their design looks because then they're not the trained designer. But I think it's skill sets that you can learn and pick up over time. Some people are feel like they really get on with Canva very easily. Like I've got worked with a few virtual assistants over my time, and they're some of them are really good and have a natural flair for it. But there's always things to learn. Even for me, there's me going, oh, I've got 20 years experience, but I'm still learning stuff. I'm still learning stuff about Canva because they're launching something like every couple of months, it feels like. And also just being, whatever your profession is, you want to be able to continue to learn. Like I feel like every day is a school day. if you're like, oh, I know it all, then, you know, like, how big is your ego? But also, like, you don't know everything. So I think that willingness to learn just as an individual, so that I can be the best that I can be, but also imparting that on those that I'm teaching, even if they're not necessarily going to be like, oh, I'm now a designer, but that they can get much better results.
Yeah, no, it's great to see that you're helping people to be a bit more confident, I suppose, and a bit more comfortable in using the tools and stuff. And like you say, there it's one thing in business really, which you see in a lot of people, that if you want to grow, you don't stop learning, and things are
Yeah,
constantly changing. So you nobody knows it all, but it's that development and that learning curve, I think. And it's all about, I suppose, you could say you give something a go, but you've got to learn as you go on with whatever you're doing.
absolutely. Yeah,
And not that you're not just the designer, the branding lady. You're also a mum.
I am. Yes.
So tell
Yes.
us a little bit about that.
So I've got a son, he's 9, soon to be 10. And I'm also at this moment in time 30 weeks pregnant. So I'm in the final stretch. So we were just discussing when this podcast comes out, I'll be with all being well, have a baby in my arms. So I'll have 2 boys. So I'll be overrun by boys. It'll be a very male household. So yeah, so that's kind of quite interesting because with having that 10-year age gap, it will have some pros and cons, but I'm physically older. I'm now 41, so I'll be 42 when the baby arrives. So that has some differences in terms of being pregnant, you know, compared to 10 years ago. And also like running a business. So 10 years ago when I had my son, I was employed. I was a graphic designer. I was working both in London and also was set up to work at home as well. And so the circumstances were quite different in terms of like the process, like having something, you know, like having maternity leave and being paid for it, and just sort of the discussions around returning to work. It's very different being employed versus being the the business owner and kind of having to navigate that as a sole trader in effect.
So how have you, in comparison, obviously you're comparing the two. Have you got a plan about your maternity leave and how you're planning to do that, and comparing it obviously to what it was like when you had your son?
Well, I've been dubbing it a mini maternity leave because unfortunately our sort of family circumstances and financial circumstances doesn't allow for me to sort of take kind of indefinite time off. Um, and to be fair, even back when, you know, when I with first time round, I didn't want to take a year off anyway. So I took initially I planned for 5 months and then I extended it to 8 months. And for me at the time, that worked. It was the right amount, and I returned to work on a 4-day week.
Mm.
Again, if finances are allowed, I would have liked to have been 3 days a week, but 4 days a week worked fine. So this time round, my plan is to have a 2 month off. So the baby's due 2nd of July. So I plan to have July and August off. So in terms of my membership, that's something where I've already arranged guest hosts, guest experts, guest Canva experts to come in and to manage those live sessions, and then a VA to sort of help with getting, you know, emails out and reminders and stuff like that. And then I will in September plan to sort of come back, all being well, and that I will at the very least be hosting my own live sessions in the membership. But in terms of the design services, I'm at the point where I'm like trying to not take anything that's too big because I'm conscious of what I've already committed to getting that done before. Um, so like June time is sort of where I'm like phasing things down. So like, well, we can maybe squeeze something in beginning of June, but I'm like trying to be cautious and not putting anything you know, too much in for June because baby number 2 could come early. um and then in terms of like ongoing, like in September onwards, it's just I've just decided to go with the flow because I don't know how I'll feel. I don't know how the birth will go. I don't know what kind of baby number 2 is going to be like. Um, and I just don't know how I'm going to feel. So I plan to sort of start taking on some projects, probably more like October onwards, and just sort of phasing in and just seeing and kind of working on some sort of part-time basis with a view of, I guess, seeing how I feel again in January 2025 onwards. So yeah, I don't have the answers, but I know I was like, right, I want to kind of gatekeep those 2 months as best as possible to just be like not worrying about anything else, if at all possible.
Yeah, you know, it's great though. I know you've said you don't know the answers, but I think you've kind of like shown and demonstrated that you're quite an organized person in terms of, you know, you've obviously sorted out how you're going to cover that time, whilst you're having your time off, with obviously getting the guest speakers in, and you kind of have a plan. And it's important also that you've mentioned about how you feel, because sometimes I think we can forget about ourselves and, you know, our well-being, our self-care, and all those things. And quite a few things change when you've had a baby, and they it's just takes a bit of time. I don't know how you were with your first one, but it's kind of like certain things do change, and you've got to.
Yeah, I mean, the circumstances are different both in a positive and negative way from, you know, 10 years ago, but this time around I've got a lot more family support around me. So I've got my husband who is around, and he's very good hands-on dad, so he'll be good. My parents moved up to Northampton where we live, so they're like 5 minutes drive away. My husband's parents and sister and her family also moved to Northampton a few years ago because they're originally from Northampton. So I've kind of located here because of my husband. So we've got that support network, which I appreciate that not everyone has. So that's amazing to be able to have that. But yeah, I mean, thinking back to what it was like having my first child, you know, that I remember the first 4 weeks was like, it was like jet lag. Like time behaved really weirdly. It'd be like 5 o'clock and be like, oh, just have some, you know, like pasta parcels for dinner. And then suddenly we're sitting down for dinner at 9 o'clock going, how did it take like 4 hours to cook something that's like, you know, according to the instruction, it's like 3 minutes. So that kind of was something that I'm kind of preparing myself, and I think that. But I also remember that I was able to get into a bit of a routine, and you know, things are, you know, you can kind of cope with it better. And I think just knowing that, again, having been through the process, you know, I remember being in the baby stage thinking, oh my God, it's so hard, like this delicate child, you know, but actually you kind of realize the pros and cons of each kind of growth phase of your child. So actually the newborn phase, once you get over that first kind of few weeks, actually is quite easy relatively. You just might be a bit sleep deprived, but like they're not crawling around, you're not like worrying about them kind of like running off somewhere, you know. So yeah, I think having, with it being my second, I think I've got a sort of sense of what I'm going to get myself into, which I think helps. But yeah, I just, like I said, the big thing that is keeping me sane this year is just like the word flow, just going with the flow. If I'm tired, trying to take that time out to rest, listen to my body, um, you know, reschedule things if I need to, and just doing what I can in the meantime. I had a little bit of a freak out this week because I was like, oh my God, I've got 10 weeks. And I kind of had massive like overwhelm and just kind of massive like inaction, just procrastination, all sorts of stuff. And it wasn't fun. I feel a bit better now that, you know, I have actually been managed to do stuff. But, you know, you got all these hormones going around and, you know, and just tiredness and stuff like that. And I think being kind to yourself, you know, whether you're pregnant or not, is like a really good coping mechanism, I think.
Yeah, I was just actually gonna say you need to be kind to yourself, and you've just said it.
Yeah.
It's almost like, sometimes I think, as a mum, because I'm a mum of five myself, and
Oh,
you know,
5, wow.
and
You're like a pro.
but the thing is, it's they're all at different stages, and I've got quite big gaps between, especially my first three. There's quite big gaps between them, 7 years and stuff, and it's you don't stop, but they all have different needs as they get to different ages and different stages of their own lives. So it's one of those things of just remembering that, there's no manual, there's no set formula, but it's working around your situation, your circumstances and stuff. And just for anybody who's listening, did having your own business, did you start your own business on the back of having your son? How did you get into it?
It was tied in a little bit. So I went full time with my business back in January 2016. So my son would have been, uh, he would have been sort of 18 months then. And it was in response to, I'd been at my last, when I was employed last time round, when I was had my son, I'd been at that place for sort of 8 years. Um, and there were certain levels of like getting complacent, that, you know, I joined just after the credit crunch in 2009. So or just before then, sorry. So there was a lot of things as to why I stayed there quite so long. um, and so the reason for the final push was that they were moving offices again, and it would have been a massive pain in the butt to commute, in the circumstances. And I'd had one pay rise during the time that I was there, and it was at a point where it's like, well, you it's not even about just getting a pay rise. It's like I'm not even being paid the market rate for like my level of experience. So that was the final push to leave. So both me and my colleague at the time said we'd work up until the move, which we both did. And so I was looking for, so that was like a London based job. Like I said, working part time, partly at home, partly in the office. Um, and so I was looking for stuff, looking for roles locally in Northampton, and I had a couple of interviews and got quite far along. But I was a little bit probably looking back, I was a bit gung ho of like, I'm a mum, like ideally I wanted to do 4 days a week. I think that was kind of the thing that I really wanted, was to be able to ideally work a like compressed working week, and obviously they would wanted, you know, a full-time person. And although it's in the creative realm, it doesn't necessarily mean that creative business operates in terms of being more open to flexible working. I mean, things are probably quite different now with the kind of, I guess, the positive impact of the pandemic and changing how we work and work life and all of that. But yeah, it was for me, because my son was 18 months old. He was, it felt like a long time before he would be, I'd feel comfortable him being in any kind of long-term like childcare or nursery situation. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll work for myself then. And I'd already had set up my business, and so I've got kind of two start dates. And when I started, it was doing wedding stationery, bespoke wedding stationery. It was called Lovely Designs, and I was kind of over the the wedding stuff. Um, so I sort of thought, well, I'll go back to my kind of roots of like more kind of general graphic design, and then my niche will come in time. I just like trust the process. So I didn't set up my business going, yes, I want to be a business owner, because I already had had a business, albeit on the side, you could call it a bit of a hobby. It was a bit more than a hobby, but I already knew how tricky it was to run a business, but it also meant I had certain things set up, like a website. I'd already done some accounting and stuff like that, you know, tax stuff. But yeah, it was in a push because of having my son, but it wasn't sort of as direct as, oh, I've had a baby, now I'm going to change. It was more just my work life changed and there wasn't another solution. So yeah, it's interesting looking back. I think in some ways I would probably have an easier life if I had made that compromise and just gone, okay, I'll work full time and maybe I can renegotiate and kind of reduce to 4 days and just get my foot in the door. But you know, we are who we are in that moment. And yeah, you know, it's been like what, 8 years now that I've been running my own business, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster. I tend to liken it to.
Yeah. It is a challenge, I think, setting up and starting and everything. But I think, one of the advantages you have is you had something going on the side. It wasn't something that you just jumped into without pre-planning or any kind of research in the background and everything. So that's really important. But also you've taken your family circumstances and kind of prioritize that is in a way just to make sure you're giving your family that time and being there for your son as well. What sort of advice would you give other mums in that kind of early stage situation where they're sort of toying with the idea of working, or doing business, or what you can do? um, like you said, after the pandemic, I think there's a lot more people or business owners that are a bit more amenable to letting people work from home and trying to balance that, because it was difficult. When I stopped work full time, it was, again, it's one of those issues where you're looking at it and think all your salary goes to childcare, but also it's the time, because you can't get the time off and you've got not enough holidays for you.
Yeah, I think I think it's a tricky question, you know, regardless of whether you've got kids or not. That I think if you're going to go into business for yourself, you have to be driven. I think you have to be willing to kind of stick with it in the long term, and much longer than maybe you think. I think for me, I was like determined not to quit. And I have dabbled with returning to a sort of part-time employment alongside running my business just before the pandemic, but that was quite a natural progression with a web developer that he wanted to become an agency, and unfortunately it didn't succeed. Well, in terms of us continuing to work because of the difficulties of the pandemic, it sort of played a part. But it's, yeah, I think if you're able to sort of set up your business in a phased approach, I think it's less stressful in some ways. It can obviously slow down the growth, because if you're kind of full time in your business, your skin's in the game. But I think there's a lot of investment both in your time and money that if you've got even a part-time job running alongside, it gives you a bit of more choices and you can kind of figure stuff out, and then kind of make that leap into full-time, you know, running your business. And in terms of adding in a child or multiple children in your case, 5, oh my goodness. But yeah, I just think it's, you're gonna have like mum guilt. There's like the kind of life admin. You know, this morning I spent, you know, 45 minutes trying to figure out what to do about dentists because we've not been before since before COVID, like way before. And it's like, oh, I get NHS dentistry. I've got 10 weeks left to get myself seen. And so the clock's ticking on that. And, you know, there's all this stuff that you got to do. And, you know, like, you know, I think also as mums, we take on, whether we willingly do it or not, but we take on the role of like planning what we're going to eat for dinner. And you know, sometimes there's sort of like the cooking, like my husband does cook, but he puts his hand up and goes, I don't enjoy cooking, so I don't mind cooking. But like there's plenty of days where it's at the end of the day and I'm like, what should we have to eat? I don't know. You know, what's in the cupboard? And do a bit of a ready steady cook kind of dinner of like just throw some stuff together. But yeah, I think it's a tricky one. I think there isn't any kind of one answer to that, but I think you need, and there can be benefits to running your own business. So for example, for me, the reason that I stay, the reason why I'm like clinging on even during sort of the tough times is that with my membership, there's no cap on my earnings. So it's trying to build up the membership numbers to the point where it's really financially successful. And obviously there's that, being able to help so many people is obviously exciting to me, building that community, but there's no kind of ceiling or cap, which being in employment there would be. But there are, you know, there's the nature of like the uncertainty around sort of doing design projects and stuff, you know, like I've got no idea like what projects I'll have when I return to work. And there is an element of kind of trusting and praying and putting yourself out there and, you know, trusting that it will come. Obviously there's like marketing and practical stuff, but it's hard being in business for yourself. And I think the irony that is that people often set up their own business because they want more time and more money, but not everyone gets to that point. You often have less money because you're investing in stuff for your business, and then you feel like you can't pay yourself anything until you reach a certain point. You never really switch off from your business. So like I've learned to be able to switch off, but I've experienced burnout at least twice, if not more, over my kind of journey, because you don't ever fully switch off, even when you're not actively doing your business. It like for me, it's always there. There's always, oh, I need to be doing this and thinking about stuff. So yeah, if you're going to set up a business, be aware, you know, tread carefully. I think it can be incredibly rewarding, but it can also be incredibly difficult and tiring, and with its own kind of downsides, I suppose. At the risk of sounding a bit doom and gloom, it's just, I think people don't realize how hard it is. And it's not even just the getting the clients thing, it's the kind of the mindset around it, the kind of mental strength that you need to have, and the kind of sticking with it as well, you know, getting the support as well from like, who do you ask for the right advice, because everyone's got an opinion. I mean, even just going on social media, you get the adverts for all these programs to kind of earn you this and earn you that, and it's so simple. And I think it can be easy to get kind of swept away by shiny objects of like, oh, that's the answer to this. And it can take time to kind of get to where you want to be. Like I've found that it's taken a lot longer. When I've set goals, there'll be sort of signs of progress, and then there'll be like a dip, like something will happen or whatever. It's not that, that's where the kind of the roller coaster thing is, because it's not a kind of upward even trajectory. It's this kind of thing, but it's like wondering, it's making sure that you're clear about your vision of like what you're doing for your business. So I feel like I'm so close to like breaking through and getting to where I want to be, that if I was to quit now, I think I would really regret it. And I think there's an element of, I don't know how employable I am now because I've like been running my business for so long. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
It's a lot of questions and things though, but you know, you mentioned something really interesting there, which is, it's funny enough, I spoke about it with another guest earlier on today, and it's you know, sometimes when we see things on social media, you think, oh my God, that business is so successful. Nobody knows the hard work that goes on behind the scenes. Nobody knows the overheads that one has to be able to get to point A and B and C and keep moving and growing the business. So it's those kind of things that I think on reflection, it's, you know, you give yourself some credit for what you've achieved and where you're going and the plans, but also equally the important things of what you're saying about the vision, having the vision and knowing your why, and then you obviously work towards trying to achieve this. But it's not easy, but we do
No.
do, you know. So
I think it's also useful to define your own measure of success. So I think it was in 2022, I was doing quite a lot of reflecting on my own kind of imposter syndromes, comparison to other people in similar kind of fields as me, and I think it was just the realization that there are different markers to success. Obviously, financial is one of them, and I think people get a bit fixated on that. But that's not the only thing. Like I have already achieved a lot of success in my business, and kind of recognizing and celebrating that has been really important. In fact, you know, how we met through F Entrepreneur
yeah,
in that group. So I was one of the top 100 of F Entrepreneur for 2023. And last year was very much all about putting myself forward to some really key awards that I felt were really professional, and some more design awards, some were kind of more general kind of business awards. And I did really well. Like I either became was silver or runner up. You know, I placed somewhere. I think there was only one design one that I didn't place, and I wasn't mad about it. I was like, okay. But it was really good to have that kind of outside validation and proof. But I think it also comes from within as well, of recognizing what your strengths are, you know, what your superpowers are, and sort of being able to see you know, like how I do my process with my clients, you know, designing the outcomes. um you know, I've got some incredibly loyal members who've been there in my group for years, in my membership. And it's just like, I think we can get so fixed also on like, oh, I need to be doing this and I should be doing that, that you forget the stuff that you do have, you know. So like I built up some really good visibility within my network and community as the go-to person for like Canva stuff. You know, I've done guest talks both in person, into, you know, memberships and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, that's something.
yeah.
That's a level of success. You know, I launched my own mobile app at the end of last year, and that's a big kind of pivotal part of like my membership and how I grow my business. Did it take longer than I planned? Yes, but that doesn't mean I fail. It's just back to that idea of like how long things take, and the kind of blocks that might come in the way, whether you've put the blocks there. Like in my case, it's usually kind of circles back to mindset, and that's where having that mental strength and dexterity is important, and that kindness for yourself as well.
No, absolutely. No, that's absolutely brilliant, Marie-Louise. And have you got, you know, other than you've mentioned the app and, you know, everything with your group and stuff, have you got anything else planned at the moment, or you're just going to take it a bit easy?
So I've been putting off organising a free webinar to help me relaunch my membership. So by the time this goes out, I would have already done it. So I'm doing a webinar sort of centered around quickly creating content and using some of Canva's kind of AI tools and bulk create and all sorts of that fun stuff to you know, help people. So I'll probably repeat that in September or October. So I plan to do it as a semi-quarterly basis to kind of give back and to my community, but also as a way of people trying before they buy, I guess, you know, in terms of the membership.
No, that's brilliant and really exciting news. But you know, it's been lovely having a chat to you today, and I wish you the very best with baby number two on the way, and hope you
Thank you.
fine, and you know, just take care of yourself. And by the time the episode comes out, obviously you probably most probably have the baby then. So wishing
Yeah,
you luck with that.
thank you. And thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.